I think we're all back from your various sessions, so thanks to everybody there. Just to say a couple of words, the panel up here is still working away. John on my left, you've met before. Helen, you've met before. Myself and Tomas. But we have Bernadette Brady here from the Further Education Network. And maybe Bernadette, you'd like to say just a couple of words about it. I have done some sort of little bits and pieces with the Further Education Network. It's a network of teachers, and you've mentioned a few things, I think, in the various sessions. But I think I'd like Bernadette to just say a few words to you before we get into the reports from the particular sessions.
Hi everybody. Just to say that we call ourselves the Further Education Network. And we're a group, we were set up by practitioners for practitioners. And really it arose out of people realising in Whitehall College, first of all, which is a CDE2B college, a group of us realised, well, a number of us had masters, but we didn't even know ourselves we had never discussed it, what our masters were about. And then we saw a notice for, and I think it was the first sort of, or that I was aware of, further education event in the NCI. And we realised that there were courses in postgrad qualifications for teachers working in further ed. Got in contact with Leo Casey, and really we've been working away slowly since then. Last year we had 4 events, and the aim of the network is really to create spaces, whether that's virtual or face-to-face, where people can meet, practitioners on the ground can meet and share research resources and ideas. So at heart, it's a very simple idea. And actually, I think it picks up on a lot of what was said earlier today in terms of, I think, Tomas, yourself, you mentioned professional conversations. So it's a place where people can meet. And the format, we've sort of borrowed it from the Computer Education Society of Ireland, CESI, for those of you who are familiar with CESI, where people can come along and from 5 minutes to 15 minutes, you just present your ideas, and then, there can be a question and answer. But the idea that it's quite informal. And, sorry, if I can just bring you to our, sorry. Is that it? Yeah. This is just a notice for our next meeting. Again, we'd 4 last year. We hope to have another 4 again. We've moved round venues, very much Dublin-based at the moment, but that can change if there are people, in an area who would like to get together themselves. Our next meeting is in the Liberties College in Dublin. It's next this day week, next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. You're all very welcome. I don't know if you can see our our Gmail address down there.
We can circulate it.
Yeah, fenireland@gmail.com. And if I can just bring you to, we also have. I'm getting my bit of PR marketing in here. Is that all right? We also have a Facebook page, which we'd like to develop further, and we also have a Twitter account. And I personally am very proud of the Twitter account because I mainly do it. And I was in one session earlier today where they talked about, well, actually it was not to use the term digital immigrant, but I do see myself as a digital immigrant. And I feel like through the network we can share practice, but I feel it's also generative as well, that we can help each other move on in our professional development. And that's the end now of the marketing. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah. Thanks, Bernadette. Okay, we're to take a report from each of the individual sessions that took place during the day. We asked that one particular idea or one particular proposal or whatever would emerge from each session, and we'll go through the 6 now. By the way, just in terms of time, we are due to finish at 4 o'clock. It might be 5 past. Or it might be 10 past, but we won't let it go too much further than that. Okay, so the first session on credits. Helen, I think you're going to report on behalf of...
Cathal had to return to Limerick. So the question that he gave me is, and this is for consideration for everybody here, is a common, either a national or a European credit system for further education and training and higher education desirable and worth pursuing? So is a common credit system worth pursuing? And I think the rationale behind that question was the whole issue of progression from further education into higher education. So that was kind of, they talked about progression and the whole idea of apprenticeships and how that progression might happen from a credit system point of view. And I know there was a representative, there was Marie Gould of the QQI. I'm not sure that Marie is still here.
Marie is, yeah, she's over there.
Hi, Marie. So that was the kind of main question that emerged from your workshop. I wasn't at it, so is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Marie?
No, I mean, I suppose in the context of QQI and my role, we outlined that we don't have a national approach to credit, and we have a credit system within the Common Award system, which is quite embedded, and we have the ECTS, which is quite embedded in higher education and training. So part of our policy commitment now is the single entity that has responsibility for the framework, and as an awarding body that makes awards across all 10 levels in the framework, we certainly have a commitment to look at a national approach, a more streamlined approach to credit. And I don't know if Cathal wants to say, this came up in the context of ECVET, I suppose, in particular, but there may be a need to look at our national systems before, you know, the embedding of ECVET.
Okay.
But it was a good workshop. We had good discussion.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for that. Fergal Finnegan, Fergal is up on top there about being an adult educator.
Well, me and Camilla facilitated a workshop, and it's quite a hard workshop to summarise because there was a lot of voices, and that was the point of it, to give practitioners a bit of space to discuss what they're concerned about. And I think that one of the main themes that I heard, at any rate, or the question that might come from it, is how do we build from what we already know across the field? I think that was a very strong. And the other thing which might be worth mentioning is the sheer complexity that people face, and thinking across the education system from an adult education perspective. Or that's what I heard. Camilla, do you want to add?
Yeah, well, all of what was just said, but I suppose also just to acknowledge, I thought it was a very rich space. I don't know if anybody who was there wants to add to that. But I think, you know, there's really high capacity within the sector already. There's a lot of really good stuff going on, a lot of innovation, a lot of creativity, and also a lot of challenges because of some of the changes that are really being enforced on a sector that has a huge history, a lot of rich and, you know, really worthwhile practice happening. And I think the more that we can illuminate that and bring that to the attention of people like the Teaching Council, I think the more we should.
Yeah. I think I would endorse that fully, the capacity that is already within the sector and how capable it is of moving forward. Whilst it can be improved, we need to remember actually there is a huge capacity there. Okay, thank you very much for that. Professional knowledge, Anne Walsh. Where's Anne? Right beside. Okay.
Our session was on digital literacy competencies, and just the idea that now they are seen as generic competencies. And my colleague Paul, who's up there, and I did a session. Paul presented some research that he has conducted as part of his PhD candidacy. And the question that came out of our session really was, how can digital literacy's continual professional development be structured and developed not only to support the development of competence, but the implementation of technology within the sector, the implementation and the use of technology within the sector. And that really was what seemed to be the frustrating part, or the message that was coming from the floor, certainly, that while they might like to be engaged and they might like to engage in the use of technologies, that there were some barriers within the system that prevented such things. Paul, do you want to perhaps add to that?
Yeah. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we were very much talking about the gap between policy and practice and how you'd operationalise competencies like digital literacies. So we showcased some kind of primary research which showed a curriculum that had digital literacies in it, and the feedback from the adult educators who took that course in terms of transferability of skills from the education to the workplace, looking at self-efficacy and various aspects like that. But from the floor, people were saying that this seemed like a very good model, but there are very basic frustrations in terms of not being able to use YouTube in the workplace, for example, that what we were presenting was all fine and well, but it was very once-off rather than there being a sectoral approach to incorporating the solace policy, which says that within the time frame of the strategy that they want as many courses as possible to use digital literacies where appropriate, but where's the bridge between bringing that policy down in a systematic fashion to the ground floor? So there really is that need for policymakers to discuss how you do operationalize these competencies on a system-wide basis rather than it being opportunistic with maybe particular advocates who happen to do it. So how do we do that in a more systematic fashion is really the frustration, I suppose, but also there's a huge appetite for people who want to do it and they want those barriers removed.
Very good, thank you. Leo Casey, the technology enhanced learning.
Thank you. I think we describe ourselves as having opened the box rather than kind of come to any firm conclusion. So it's a tough ask to actually, just put one single point down there. Just maybe to reprise just some aspects of the workshop that we've just been involved in. We had 4 contributors. It started with John Wall here from Waterford, who kind of set a foundation and emphasised enablers of technology enhanced learning, and in particular the backdrop of technology, pedagogy, and also what's often overlooked, the social side as well. And that kind of set the stage. Jane O'Kelly from DCU described online communities of practice and how there's a kind of a dynamic between the social aspect of learning and the individual aspect of learning that gets acted out maybe sometimes in terms of consensus or compulsion, like an assessment that might be agreed actions that people might want to do, or an assessment that maybe is compulsory in order to actually achieve the outcomes of the programme. And Sam and Dominic Kirby, Sam Coogan from NCI, Dominic Kirby from Waterford Institute of Technology, really spoke about the blended learning contexts in terms of mixing up the use of technology, the reuse of other people's education resources, and integrating that into teaching. But overall as well, in the tone of all of the delivery and the comments that came from the floor, there was let's say a chill out approach to technology enhanced learning. That people weren't jumping up and down excited, saying there's going to be a revolution. I suppose I'd have to take some responsibility for nurturing the chill out aspect of it by suggesting when the people think back 10 years to 2005 and even 10 years before that to 1995, and at that time when the internet was a big new thing, I was conscious, I never mentioned it at the workshop, but when I was sitting in that room, right at my feet was an overhead projector, which actually goes back to 1980 something, I'd say, So technology, I think, from the perspective of to summarise how we as teachers look at it, it's a tool for teaching, it's an enabler of our profession. We can't ignore it. It's core to the life world that we all share at the moment. But really, we can adopt a stance toward it that really is quite positive, quite aloof, and I think overall the kind of foundational ideas of what it means to be a teacher haven't changed all that much, even in the last 30 years, nor do we foresee in the next 20 or 30 years. I'll finish by we asked the participants to make very brief predictions of 2025, where we agreed among ourselves we'll reconvene to check if we've got it right. So among the highlights are foreign languages will be learned by like implants in the brain. The students will be producers rather than receptors. That was a very common one that came across. The idea of some kind of global instructional kind of a program that people can tap into, rather like a kind of a bigger version of a Khan Academy, that came across. The demise of keyboards was something also predicted. 3D presentations, various other innovations. A kind of a mix of an exciting future and a little bit cautious that we wouldn't like to use some of the core qualities that we have in today's classroom. Thanks.
That's very good. Okay, thank you. Geraldine Myrna for the pedagogies in further education training practice. Geraldine.
Thank you. I just want to say, first of all, apologies for Maeve O'Grady, who facilitated the workshop with me. She had to leave early, so just to mention that. Well, we complemented the morning workshop on pedagogy by focusing on the kinds of transformations that we wanted to bring about in our learners. And I drew on some research that I've been working on within WIT, where I've been using metaphors as a way of trying to create meaning and to connect us with the source of our core identity of teaching and what we want to achieve with our learners. And that was very interesting because initially there was resistance as we moved from one sort of domain to another. But very, very interesting results came from that, and it was very rich discussion. And what we saw is that in terms of what people are hoping to achieve with their students, that they are not in a position where they're setting up some kind of binary opposition between society and getting people ready for an economy, but that it's something very integrated, and that above all they're focusing on the human side of learning and the human aspect of learning. And what was coming through in the metaphors that people were generating is that we are very committed and focused to helping people to reimagine their possibilities and new possibilities in every sphere of their life. And there was a sense that that ability to help people to reimagine, because it doesn't appear in learning outcomes, because it's not something that we can assess and quantify directly, that it gets pushed off the centre of the forum, but that it should be essentially very central to how we move forward with our learners. And although we, if you like, talked to a certain extent about what we want to achieve with our learners, we then looked at how can we achieve these transformations in our classroom. And certainly what we came up with is that our pedagogies are central, not the subject-centred content that we often get bogged down in, but it is our pedagogy which models what our learners can learn about the transformations we're trying to achieve. And so we tried to look at maybe how we talk about what we want to achieve, and then how we put that into practice. Now, it was very quick. It was just an introduction, and we're hoping it's a work in progress. People have taken away a self-assessment tool. We're hoping that they will finish this praxis by going back into their classroom and looking at some practices that can help them to achieve transformation. If there was a question, I think the underpinning question was, is it possible to promote transformational learning within the active inclusion strategy? And certainly that's what we were looking at, was the power of pedagogy within the classroom and the power of agency that teachers have within a classroom. And just to emphasize from the first workshop on pedagogy, there was great concern among practitioners who were saying there is very sophisticated practice. There's a long tradition of how to do this. And the question is, how do we connect up where the practice is, where the source is, where the knowledge is, with the policy providers, so that we don't reinvent wheels or reinvent systems that we've tried to break away from in the first place, but truly create an alternative system of education for people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Geraldine. And last but not least, research in FET, Justin Ramy. Justin, thanks.
Thanks. What we were looking at was research around further education and training. And there was a number of issues came up, some connected to research, some broader issues, which obviously also highlighted the complexity of this whole discussion, and the discussion that needs to continue. But some of the themes that emerged in terms of the response we got from the group were research on what kind of research, and practitioner research was something that came up from the floor as important, and it was felt that it was important to capture this, but also to bring that research on a level, so that research could help inform policy in the future, but also to capture legacy issues, because we have quite a disparate sector of different bodies, different organisations. Some have disappeared already, and some will disappear. And it's important that there is a voice for the further education and training sector in there. And part of this research agenda is to capture that, but to capture a level that is valid. Is capture it so it can be for not just local consumption, but policy consumption, for national consumption and international consumption as well. Things like we sometimes only measure what value, what's measured, comes into this. This idea of value and values came up as an important recurring theme, and there's three kind of distinct areas. There's the individual in terms of research. There's the institutional, and then there's the sectoral type aspect of that. And we as the FET Forum are dominated by higher education institutions. So really part of this was speaking from our voice, and what can the FET Forum do, or what can the higher education sector do to enable research capacity building, and this is really important as well. And I know that, and we did mention other initiatives that have occurred already, like the Teaching Council's Research Hub and Research Alive, and all these kind of things are contributing to that voice. But there's other organisations need to be involved in that as well, and Solus needs to have a strong presence, not just in helping inform strategy and policy, but from a funding point of view. And it does, unfortunately, come back to money again. Research costs money, and it's important that the money is put up there. One other person mentioned this idea of research, what's its function, and this idea of illuminating practice, and I thought that was a good point, not just highlighting and capturing, but illuminating practice as well. And a strong consensus that came across was the idea of working together on this. So there has to be a momentum that carries on after this colloquium. It can't be just the FET Forum going off and discussing what we want to, or the further education network. It's about, there's lots of different players there. And they need to be recognised first of all, and see how they can actually help each other. But that is going to take, again, some kind of resourcing, some kind of push. The FET Forum at the minute is all self-funded. We fund ourselves to do this. So that's important as well. But maybe somewhere down the line, Europe, all the other places have high-ranking journals in further vocational education and training, which are recognised globally, and they do help inform policy. So maybe it's time to look at this idea of having a journal. We only have Irish Educational Studies, and that covers the whole gambit of teaching. So this distinctive nature of further education and training should be recognised as well, and then maybe there is room for a journal that captures a lot of those other areas within further education and training as well. So we don't have a question for you, we've just lots of points. Sorry.
Okay. I think that's great. Thank you to all of the facilitators for all of your work during the day. I think you've one more task to do, that's to get some sort of brief summary back to Catherine. Maybe homework for this evening, seeing as there's so much energy left. But that if you can get around to that sometime in the next couple of days. Okay, and thanks to all of the facilitators again. We're now getting towards conclusion. It's 2 minutes to 1:15, 15 minutes over the time. But I'll ask Dr. John Wall, who's head of the School of Lifelong Learning and Education here in Waterford Institute of Technology, to draw some concluding remarks for us. Thank you.
I have 2 minutes. Thanks. I think there's an old, bear with me, I'm just going to want to make sure I capture a couple of points. There's an old Irish shanukkel, and we'll make cart.
Yeah.
Too small Latin Hebra. And I think that evidence today that we've a good start, and when you listen to the feedback even from the parallel workshop sessions, it shows that there's a momentum there and there's something very concrete to build on. That's the engineer in me. Stan at the outset said that a colloquium is an opportunity to engage and interact. And I think that we've been more than successful in actually achieving that. Paul O'Toole from Sulla said in his presentation that there are 5 goals of the FET strategy, and one of them he touched on was active inclusion. Well, I think our engagement today is a demonstration of active inclusion, and I suppose I reflect on Confucius, I think it was, said, "Tell me I forget, show me I may remember, and involve me and I will understand." And I think we've all today embodied or enhanced our knowledge as part of that engagement and discussions. And I think, just as Justin had said about research and others have talked about, there's a lot to build on looking to the future. I mean, if you look at the themes we discussed today, we discussed FET's the national strategy, policies relating to CPD in further education, and we had the workshops looking at the role of research in FET, technology enhanced learning, which I would be, I suppose, passionate about, a shared community of practice, the European credit transfer system, and pedagogy in adult and further education settings, the voice of practitioner. The new FET strategy that was discussed is redefining the sector. You know, it is actually changing roles, changing responsibilities, who's accountable, all those challenging things. And what's quite interesting is, and I am going to look at this list, the importance and the engagement. If I just articulate the list of contributors and stakeholders today that were at this event: the Department of Education and Skills, Teaching Council, Further Education Support Services, SOLAS, QQI, Further Education Network, ETBI, the community sector, enterprise boards, or employer bodies, and education and training boards. Think of that sort of list. Like, that shows that there's a momentum now starting to build up that is quite important. Justin and others mentioned about the staying connected and building on it. Bernadette talked about the FET network, and we should continue to engage with that, and I know there are future events. I suppose it's remiss to me not to finally thank certain people. Firstly, to thank Stan for all the work. I mean, he's kept us all motivated and engaged, and great tribute is due to Stan for his leadership as regards that. I also need to acknowledge Paul O'Toole from SOLAS. Now, Paul had to head away, but I think his contribution was engaging. And Tomas from the Teaching Council. Our workshop facilitators, I was involved. It was great to sit back and leave someone else responsible, but it was great to be involved in those. And all you who travelled here today, much appreciated. Finally, within WIT, it actually would be very remiss of me not to acknowledge people, and now I'm into dangerous ground, so apologies if I miss out on absolutely anyone, because it's not meant anyway, but in the great work that's preparation. That includes people like porters, people that you don't see here. I happened to come in here at 7:30 last night, and the porters were doing work here, you know, getting ready for the event today. Ed Services, I see our 2 colleagues, Gary and Jim here, and my colleagues in the School of Lifelong Learning and Education. They've done a huge amount of work that makes my job much easier, because I don't have to be involved at all, and I have to acknowledge and appreciate that at the outset. Normally I wouldn't necessarily mention names, but I'm going to mention 2 people here. So, I mean, one is my colleague here, Helen Murphy, who did a huge amount of work in the background as the lead, getting all this together. And the final person is over there in the corner. She's going to kill me after, is Catherine Earle. Like, to be fair, she was in here last night when I came in at 7:30, and nothing was phasing her at all. So look, I just want to thank everyone and maybe acknowledge that it's easy for me to stand up here. People have done all the work. Thanks very much.
I think that's it, folks. A safe home to everybody, and look forward to meeting you at the next session. Thank you. Bye-bye.